It was Christmas Eve, and I arrived home unexpectedly. I discovered my daughter outside, shivering in 32 degrees Fahrenheit, without a blanket to provide any warmth. Her in laws were inside, celebrating with champagne by the fireplace. I burst through the door, holding my daughter close, and uttered 6 words. I'm thrilled you're here. If you're viewing this clip, please show your appreciation with a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel and share in the comments where you're tuning in to my tale of retribution from. I'm keen to understand the extent of its reach. I exited the cab. My substantial footwear sank into the deep snow that blanketed the grounds of my daughter's residence in Boise, Idaho. The biting wind struck my face with the force of a physical blow, compelling me to draw my coat's collar higher. After years spent as a taekwondo instructor, I believed I was prepared for any challenge, from the stifling heat of the training hall to the most unforgiving winters. Yet the frigid air of this Christmas Eve sent shivers down my spine. I stood before the brightly illuminated house, a blend of anticipation and apprehension swirling within me. My intent was to surprise Emily today, to witness my little girl's radiant smile when her mother appeared out of the blue. The front garden was completely covered in snow, with no sign of footprints, as if no one had bothered to clear it. Through the large bay window, I could see the warm, inviting glow emanating from the living room, accompanied by cheerful Christmas music from a Bluetooth speaker. The carol Jingle Bells, a childhood favorite of Emily's, filled the air. I moved closer, attempting to catch a glimpse inside. Before me lay a long table adorned with a vibrant red tablecloth, laden with traditional holiday fare. A golden roasted turkey, steaming platters of cornbread stuffing, a bowl of cranberry salad, studded with glistening apple pieces and raisins, and glasses of red wine catching the light. The entire Whitlock clan, my son-in-law's relatives, were present. I recognized Mr. Harold Whitlock, Ryan's father, seated with an air of command, and Mrs. Evelyn Whitlock, his mother, holding a wine glass with a self-satisfied smirk. Ryan's sister Abigail was also there, her 2 young children a constant source of laughter. They were all raising their glasses, proposing toasts near the crackling hearth. But where was Emily? A frown creased my brow as I strained to see further into the room, wondering if she might be tucked away somewhere. I had envisioned her beaming, engaged in happy conversation, just as she used to be, wrapping her arms around my neck and sharing endless stories. Then a faint whimpering sound reached me from the porch. I turned and my heart lurched. In the dim light, beside a snow-laden poinsettia planter, Emily was huddled in an old wooden chair. She wore only a thin blouse, her slender shoulders convulsing, her disheveled hair clinging to her forehead, damp from melted snow. I rushed to her side, my heart pounding wildly. "Emily!" I cried out, my voice trembling with alarm. I swiftly removed my coaching jacket and wrapped it around her with urgency, my unsteady hands touching her arm. It felt as cold as ice, devoid of any warmth. Emily lifted her face, her eyes red-rimmed, her pale lips barely forming a whisper. "Mom!" Her voice was so delicate it seemed to vanish into the air, and she slumped against my shoulder. I held her tightly, feeling her body tremble like a trapped bird in a tempest. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here," I murmured, attempting to maintain a calm demeanor, though tears pricked my eyes. I retrieved an additional sweater from my bag and draped it around Emily, trying to impart some of my own warmth. I lifted her into my arms, her sodden slippers falling into the snow, leaving a trail of wetness. I held her close, feeling the feebleness of her breath against my neck. In that instant, my sole desire was to remove her from that place, away from the biting cold, away from whatever had led her to this state. However, From inside the house, the careless and cruel laughter continued. I distinctly heard Ryan's resonant voice, full of smugness and bravado, boasting about something. The entire table erupted in mirth, and the clinking of glasses sounded like distant, unsettling music. They were content and warm by the fireplace, while my daughter, my own flesh and blood, shivered outside in the cold, as if she were undeserving of a place within that home. Merely a few hours prior, I was at the Boise airport, still feeling the residual warmth from a week of coaching the national taekwondo team. The heat of the mat seemed to linger on me, even as I stood in the chilly airport concourse. I pulled my well-worn suitcase, so filled with excitement that I could barely stand still, envisioning Emily's face lighting up when I showed up unannounced on Christmas Eve. My heart was racing. She had always been my guiding light ever since she was a small child, clinging to my legs and pleading for one more bedtime story, blossoming into a sweet young woman whose smile could dispel my most challenging days. However, my role as head coach necessitated frequent travel. Seattle, national competitions, stealing precious moments with Emily. Each time I departed, I told myself, just one more tournament, and then I'll be with her. And now I was here, anticipating a Christmas reunion that I was certain would bring her joy. I sat in the airport waiting area for the short drive to the Boise suburbs, pulling out my phone to call Emily. I yearned to hear her voice, to confirm she was home. The phone rang and rang, each tone amplifying my nervousness. No response. I frowned, assuming she was perhaps occupied with preparing Christmas dinner with the Whitlock family. I called again and then once more. The outcome was always the same: silence. A sense of unease settled in my chest, spreading like ink on paper. I sent a text message. "Mum's on her way. Are you home?" I stared at the screen, awaiting the small blue confirmation checkmark. Nothing appeared. I attempted to dismiss the unsettling feeling, convincing myself she might have misplaced her phone or was distracted with decorating the Christmas tree, as she did every year. The plane had landed in Boise after dark. I retrieved my suitcase from the airport, and the winter night's chill struck me with full force, seeping into my skin. Families were embracing, laughing, making their way to midnight mass. A father carried his young daughter on his shoulders. She held a candy cane and giggled with delight. I watched them, a lump forming in my throat. I had carried Emily like that too, holding her hand as we walked through streets adorned with twinkling Christmas lights. But now I was alone, dragging a heavy suitcase, stepping out of the airport with a profound sense of loneliness. I hailed a taxi and, with a voice roughened by exhaustion, instructed, "Take me to Meadow Creek, 12th Street." En route, traffic was sluggish, the streets teeming with people bundled in coats and scarves, heading to church for Mass. I gazed out the taxi window at the warm lights emanating from the houses along the road. Church bells chimed faintly in the distance, mingled with the sound of a choir singing Silent Night from somewhere nearby. I smiled, picturing Emily busily in the kitchen, preparing the mashed potatoes she had learned from me. As the car stopped at an intersection, I glanced outside and noticed a group of police officers directing traffic. Among them, I recognized Jake, a former student from my days teaching taekwondo at the local community center. He stood tall, exuding confidence in his police uniform, yet his kind smile remained unchanged. I lowered the window and called out, "Jake!" He turned, his eyes widening with recognition. "Miss Rose, you're back," he exclaimed, adjusting his police cap. I smiled, trying to mask my fatigue. "Yes, I just finished training in Seattle. Are you still working in Boise?" Jake nodded, his smile beaming. "Indeed, I'm a traffic officer now. Are you here for Christmas with family?" "With Emily," I replied, my heart warming at the mention of my daughter. But then Jake's expression faltered. His smile vanished. A flicker of apprehension crossed his eyes as if he wanted to speak but couldn't. A foreboding feeling ignited within me, spreading like a flame. "What's wrong, Jake? Is something amiss?" I inquired, lowering my voice. He shook his head, forcing a smile. No, it's nothing, Miss Rose. I'm just glad you're back." Yet his eyes betrayed his concern. I intended to press him further, but the light turned green. The driver accelerated and the car pulled away, leaving Jake watching me from the street, his hand gripping the brim of his cap. As we approached Emily's house, I asked the driver to stop a short distance from the entrance. I wanted to surprise them, to see Emily's reaction when she found me standing at the door. I grabbed my suitcase and proceeded along the snow-covered path, my boots leaving deep impressions. The golden light from the surrounding houses shone like illuminated candles. From a distance, I heard the sound of a guitar and singing emanating from Emily's living room. I smiled, imagining her singing like she did when she was a child, standing by my side, belting out Winter Wonderland with her clear voice. I left my suitcase on the step, took a deep breath, and prepared to knock. But then a mocking laugh cut through the air, sharp as a blade. I froze, my hand hovering inches from the door. Mr. Harold Whitlock's deep, gruff voice boomed clearly. "That's what they call a daughter-in-law, a woman who can't even have children, 4 miscarriages. Haven't they embarrassed us enough?" His laughter was heavy, dripping with scorn. Then Ryan's voice, cold and cruel, joined in. "Always faking depression, locking herself in her room to do nothing. If it weren't for my parents, I'd have kicked her out ages ago." Another burst of laughter followed, accompanied by the clinking of wine glasses. I heard Abigail, Ryan's sister, her tone dripping with venom. "Yes, utterly useless. A wife who can't have children, what's she good for? Pretending to be sick just to get coddled. Pathetic." Each word felt like a physical blow to my heart. I stood there, paralyzed, my breath caught in my throat. This was how they treated my Emily, my daughter, who yearned for a happy family, who poured her heart into every meal for her husband. Now they were humiliating her in this manner. 4 miscarriages, each one leaving her sobbing until she had no tears left during our phone calls. And now they claimed she was faking it. I clenched my fists, my fingernails digging into my palms. And then I saw Emily, curled up in a wooden chair on the porch, wearing only a thin blouse, her head bowed, her entire body trembling in the freezing cold. My eyes blurred with tears, my heart stopped. I scooped Emily into my arms. Her body was still shaking, as cold as a block of ice. My hands trembled too, not merely from the bitter Boise night, but from the incandescent rage burning in my chest. Each step toward the Whitlock's door felt as though I were carrying 1,000 pounds, but I did not falter. I pounded on the wooden door, my knocks firm, drowning out the Christmas music blaring from within. Jingle bells looped incessantly, a cruel mockery of the painful scene I had just witnessed. No one responded. I gritted my teeth and banged harder, as if intending to shatter the door with a single blow. Finally, the door swung open. Mrs. Evelyn stood there, a glass of red wine precariously balanced in her hand. Her lips were painted a bright red, glossy under the light. The scent of alcohol wafted from her, but her face wore a forced smile, an attempt at politeness. "Hello, Miss Rose, what a surprise," she said, her voice syrupy yet insincere, as if I were an unwelcome guest. "Why didn't you let us know so we could roll out the red carpet?" I met her gaze, making no effort to conceal my anger. "Let you know," I growled, each word hissing through my teeth. "If I had, how would I have witnessed this? What have you done to my daughter?" I held Emily tighter, feeling her faint breath against my shoulder. Each breath was a stark reminder that I could not let this stand. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, glancing at Emily in my arms with a grimace, as if regarding something bothersome. Emily just wanted some fresh air, she stated, her tone smooth but laced with disdain. Don't make a fuss about it, it's Christmas. Come inside, don't stand out in the cold. Her words struck me like a slap across the face. Fresh air. While my daughter was practically freezing outside in a thin blouse. Before I could reply, Ryan appeared behind his mother, his shirt unbuttoned, exuding an air of deliberate nonchalance. He held a bottle of wine and shot me a defiant look. "Mother, close the door," he said, his tone laced with arrogance, his chin raised. "Let her stay out there until she gets over it. Who shows up to Christmas dinner acting fragile to avoid helping?" He let out a mocking chuckle, as if he had uttered something witty. Those words were another dagger, piercing not just my heart but Emily's as well. I felt her body shrink in my arms as if she longed to disappear. From the dining table, Abigail's voice rang out, sharp and venomous. "Precisely. A woman who can't even carry a baby to term. What's her value? Useless." Her laughter cut like a blade, blending with the murmurs of others around the table. I heard Abigail's 2 children, Emily's cousins, rush out to the porch, their curiosity piqued. They looked at Emily in my arms, then giggled, whispering to each other, "Aunt Emily is in trouble." Their innocent little voices burned like salt on an open wound. My face flushed with rage. I rammed my shoulder into the door, then kicked it forcefully. The door flew open, slamming against the wall with a resounding bang that silenced the room. Evelyn's wine sloshed, spilling crimson stains onto the opulent rug. The Christmas music abruptly ceased, as if someone had yanked the speaker's plug. The atmosphere in the room became heavy, suffocating, as if all the oxygen had been depleted. I stepped into the center of the living room, still holding Emily. Each step left a trail of melted snow on the polished hardwood floor, like indelible marks of fury. Every eye was fixed on me. Mr. Harold, his expression cold. Evelyn, her false smile gone. Abigail, her eyes alight with disdain. The rest of the family, a mixture of shock and irritation. I felt their hostility in every glance, but I paid it no mind. Carefully, I settled Emily onto the couch, draping my scarf around her shoulders. Her hands remained icy, trembling as if the snow's chill still clung to her. I knelt, meeting her gaze, attempting to infuse her with some of my strength, though inwardly I was a tempest of fury and pain. The Whitlocks' living room remained brightly illuminated. The fireplace crackled, but the air was thick with an unspoken tension, as if everyone was bracing for an outburst. Ryan stepped closer, his face flushed from wine, his eyes gleaming with arrogance. He lowered his voice, cold yet still smug, as if he owned the place. "You don't get to cause a scene in my house, Rose," he stated, emphasizing my house as if to remind me of my outsider status. Ryan stood tall, one hand on his hip, his shirt half unbuttoned in a gesture of contempt. But in his eyes I caught a fleeting glimpse of uncertainty. He knew I wasn't easily intimidated. I shot to my feet, pointing directly at his face, my voice quivering with fury. "No right?" I snapped. "And you? You think you have the right to cast my daughter out into the cold, to let her nearly freeze to death?" My blood boiled in my head, every word erupted from my chest. "Is that what you call a husband? Is that what you call family?" I surveyed the banquet table, the plates still steaming, the wine glasses glinting as if mocking Emily's suffering. Mr. Harold Whitlock slowly rose from the head of the table, adjusting his suit jacket, his deep voice resonating with authority. "That's quite enough, Ms. Rose," he declared. "This is a family matter. A woman who cannot bear children needs to learn to endure. That is simply how it is." His words struck like a sledgehammer, cold and cruel. I met his gaze, recognizing the arrogance of a man who had spent years as a judge, accustomed to controlling every situation, but today he had chosen the wrong adversary. I glanced at the table where the roasted turkey still emitted its aroma, the cornbread stuffing neatly arranged, the wine sparkling under the lights. Then I looked at Emily, still shivering on the couch, her stomach emitting a faint growl, like a silent accusation. I could no longer restrain myself. My voice erupted, sharp and cutting. So you feast while my daughter is outside in 32-degree weather. No coat, no food. Is that what you call tradition? Is that what you call humanity? Evelyn shrugged, her smile icy, as if I were exaggerating the situation. A woman who cannot have children even if she eats is simply a waste, she said softly, her voice dripping with disdain. She raised her wine glass and took a sip, as if to emphasize her complete indifference to my feelings or Emily's. Abigail chimed in from the table, her tone acidic, adding salt to the wound. Your daughter always uses depression as an excuse to avoid work, she stated. In all this time, has she ever cooked a decent meal for the family? All she does is lie in bed, whining, dragging everyone down. She shook her head, her eyes filled with mockery, as if Emily were a burden the entire Whitlock family was forced to bear. Murmurs from the relatives around the table grew louder. Some shook their heads, others snickered as if in agreement with those venomous words. Every sound, every sideways glance pierced my chest like another stab. I wanted to overturn that opulent table and demand justice for my daughter, but then a faint voice emanated from the couch. Emily, my little girl, had stirred. She attempted to sit up, her trembling hands gripping the edge of the couch. I'm so tired, she stammered, her voice breaking, barely audible. No one understands. Her words were instantly crushed by Ryan's outburst. Enough, he barked. Shut up, you've embarrassed me enough already. He stepped towards her, his gaze icy, as if intending to shatter what little strength she had left. I saw Emily's shoulders slump, her red eyes brimming with tears, and my heart constricted. I stepped in front of her, prepared to do whatever was necessary to protect her. Memories of Emily flooded my mind like an avalanche. I recalled the days she would call me, sobbing over the phone, each time she lost a child, the first, the second, the third, the fourth. With every miscarriage, her soul fractured into pieces. She had been a sweet girl who dreamed of a warm home, family dinners with her husband and children, but the repeated pain had pushed her to the brink of despair. I tried to be there for her, even through long-distance calls, but I never imagined the Whitlock family, those I had trusted, would treat my daughter in this manner. Ryan, my son-in-law, whom I once believed to be a decent man, now revealed his true nature, a cruel bully who had cast my daughter out into the cold, treating her like refuse. I was on the verge of losing control. Through the window, I saw Jake standing silently on the porch. Perhaps he had been patrolling the neighborhood, his stern gaze and clenched fist indicating he had heard and witnessed this cruelty. I gave him a subtle nod, signaling him not to intervene just yet. But inside, his presence offered a ray of hope. I knew I was not alone. I had a witness, someone who knew the truth. Ryan took another step, pointing at me, dropping the pretense of politeness. I'm warning you. This is my house, he declared. Stay out of it or things will escalate. He smirked, confident that I would back down under the Whitlock family's influence. He was mistaken. I clenched my fists, my knuckles cracking, feeling all the rage I had suppressed throughout my life explode in that moment. The air in the room was so thick it felt as though a single spark could ignite it all. I met Ryan's eyes, my voice low but sharp as a knife. You believe you can threaten me? I challenged. You think you can continue to harm my daughter without consequence? You are mistaken, Ryan. I will not let this go. I turned to face the entire Whitlock family, from Mr. Harold's cold stare to Evelyn's faint smirk to Abigail's disdainful glare. All of you, I stated, my voice echoing in the hushed room, you will pay for what you have done to Emily. The Whitlocks' living room fell into a terrifying silence, as if the air had been completely evacuated, leaving only a palpable tension on the verge of detonation. I placed my hand on Emily's shoulder, feeling her frail frame beneath the scarf, my voice steady and unwavering. This is no longer a private matter. This is domestic abuse. My statement reverberated like a heavy object dropped into a tranquil body of water, its disturbance rippling through every individual present. Evelyn, still cradling her wineglass, emitted a derisive snicker, twirling the liquid within as if amused by a private jest. Abuse, she declared, her voice saturated with derision and haughtiness. We're merely educating her on her proper standing. Rose, you ought to express gratitude for our forbearance with her thus far. Ryan advanced, his eyes inflamed by drink and fury. He expelled his words with a guttural force, as if masticating each syllable before releasing it. She feigns depression, exaggerates suffering to shirk responsibility. Nobody is inflicting harm upon her. We are simply exhausted by her utter lack of productivity. He paused, fixing me with a malevolent grin. Reconsider your maternal instruction, Rose. No one endures 4 consecutive pregnancies without a successful outcome. Perhaps she engineered these losses intentionally. Those pronouncements struck me like the sharp edge of a blade. They not only wounded my spirit, but also reopened Emily's unhealed emotional scars. I heard her breath hitch as if struck sharply in the chest. 4 miscarriages, 4 times she had called me, her voice a broken testament to despair, confessing the loss of the children she would never embrace. Each instance I could only grip the receiver, powerless from a distance, attempting to offer solace with platitudes. And now, Ryan dared to confront me, suggesting her suffering was self-inflicted. My hand clenched, nails digging into my palm, blood surging to my face. He had transgressed a boundary I could not overlook. I retrieved my mobile from my coat. Though my hand trembled, I rapidly keyed the number for the nearest law enforcement agency. I am contacting the authorities, I stated, my voice as frigid as glacial ice, though internally a tempest raged. A formal complaint will be lodged. You will face legal repercussions. I imbued each utterance with emphatic weight, as if etching them into the very air, ensuring comprehension of my resolute intent. Ryan visibly faltered. The wine decanter slipped from his grasp, striking the polished timber floor with a clatter, its crimson contents painting a stark stain upon the opulent carpet. Apprehension flickered in his eyes, though he strove to reassert his veneer of superiority. "You wouldn't dare!" he bellowed, yet his voice wavered, betraying his lack of expectation for such decisive action. Mr. Harold, who had been observing with a frigid demeanour, stepped forward, adjusting his tie. His resonant, gravelly voice projected with an authoritative timbre. "You possess no comprehension of the magnitude of your defiance, Rose," he stated. "My professional life has been dedicated to the judicial bench. I have witnessed the nadir of human experience. Do you truly believe a mere telephone call will induce trepidation in us?" His gaze was piercing, a stark reminder that the Whitlock lineage was not easily perturbed. Yet I remained resolute. I had witnessed my daughter's profound distress, and nothing, not even Mr. Harold's considerable influence, would compel my silence. Abigail, from her seated position, crossed her arms and offered a sardonic smile. "Proceed, Miss Rose, make your call," she taunted, her tone laced with derision. "Let us ascertain who merits credence. a distraught individual, or a family of esteemed standing? Do you truly believe law enforcement will align with your position?" Her venomous laughter echoed, confident in my impending failure. Emily, still seated on the sofa, tugged at my sleeve, her whisper betraying her agitation. "Mother, please reconsider. I merely desire tranquility." Her crimson-rimmed eyes, replete with terror, conveyed a profound dread of escalating repercussions. I observed her, my heart heavy with empathy. I understood her apprehension, fear of the Whitlock retribution, of further public humiliation. Yet I also knew that capitulating now would condemn Emily to perpetual anguish. I clasped her hand firmly, endeavouring to impart a measure of my fortitude. "You need not harbour fear," I said, my voice gentle yet unwavering. "I shall be your protector. I give you my solemn vow." I lifted her into my arms, the snowflakes from her attire cascading onto the rug like fragments of a shattered dream. I disregarded the Whitlocks' contemptuous glances and their muttered imprecations. My sole objective was to extricate her from that oppressive environment, from the confines of the cruelty she had endured for far too long. As I turned towards the egress, I perceived Jake through the frosted pane, standing on the veranda, his hand resting upon his radio, his eyes aflame with a concealed intensity, poised for immediate intervention. I offered a subtle inclination of my head, a silent communication of my readiness for the ensuing conflict. Jake reciprocated with a firm nod, his grip on the radio unwavering, a tangible pledge of his unwavering support. I departed without a backward glance. Behind me I heard Evelyn admonishing the domestic staff to attend to the spilled wine upon the carpet. I heard Ryan strike the table in frustration, uttering an expletive. Subsequently, Mr. Harold's deep, irate voice resounded as he engaged in a telephone conversation. All these sounds were like barbed projectiles striking my back, yet I remained undeterred. I transported Emily to my modest dwelling adjacent to the National Training Centre, where I had resided for years as a coach. It was unpretentious, featuring a living area with an aging sofa, a compact kitchen alcove, and a scattering of family photographs adorning the walls. Nevertheless, to me it represented a sanctuary, a refuge where I could shield my daughter from the Whitlock's vitriol and the pervasive chill. I escorted Emily to her chamber and gently settled her onto the bed. She continued to shiver despite being enfolded in my substantial coat. I searched the wardrobe for a faded sweater, dressed her in it, and then prepared a mug of hot cocoa, its comforting fragrance permeating the frigid atmosphere. "Consume this, my dearest," I murmured, placing the mug in her hands. But she merely gazed at it, her eyes vacant, as if she believed herself undeserving of even a modicum of solace. My mobile chimed, interrupting my reflections. It was Jake. His voice was deep and composed. "Ms. Rose, I have submitted the initial report at the precinct, but the Whitlocks will not yield easily. They wield considerable influence. You are aware of this. I stand prepared to offer sworn testimony as a witness, should you require my assistance." I perceived the conviction in his tone, akin to an inextinguishable ember. Jake, my former protege, the young man who once stood in the dojo with such bright-eyed enthusiasm, was now my stalwart ally in a different arena of conflict. "Assist me in preparing, Jake," I requested, my voice succinct but laden with gratitude. "This endeavour may prove protracted." He responded with a simple affirmation. "Understood, coach. I am at your disposal." The subsequent morning, I took Emily to a therapeutic professional in the heart of Boise. Dr. Linda Carter, an elderly woman with a benevolent countenance, welcomed us into her comfortably appointed office. Following her consultation with Emily, she turned to me, her voice tinged with sorrow and gravity. She is experiencing profound depression, Miss Rose. The cumulative effect of 4 miscarriages, coupled with the unceasing derision from her in-laws, has eroded her self-worth. She requires repose, therapeutic intervention, and above all, a sense of security. I inclined my head, a pang of anguish tightening my chest. I was acutely aware of Emily's fragile state, yet hearing it articulated by the therapist felt like another grievous blow. I observed her, curled in her chair, her hands clasped tightly, and I blamed myself for not intervening sooner. That afternoon, Jake paid a visit to the apartment, not in his official capacity, but bearing a bag of fruit and several well-worn cookbooks. He placed them before Emily, a note of hesitation in his demeanor. "I am aware of your fondness for culinary pursuits," he remarked. I envisioned that commencing with something simple, perhaps a pie or some chicken noodle soup, might offer some solace. His voice was gentle, yet the concern etched upon his features was palpable. Emily lowered her gaze, clutching the hem of her blouse, and murmured, "Thank you, but I doubt I possess the capacity for any undertaking at this juncture." Her words pierced my heart with the sharpness of a needle. Jake's expression faltered momentarily, but he forbore from pressing further, simply offering a quiet nod. He deposited the bag on the table and then addressed me. "Ms. Rose, whatever your requirements, do not hesitate to articulate them. I stand resolutely behind you." That evening, after Emily had succumbed to slumber, I sat at the kitchen table, illuminated by the dim overhead light. Surrounded by a profusion of documents, I detected an unusual sound from the exterior, followed by the silent intrusion of a thick envelope beneath the door, as stealthy as a veiled threat. I opened it. Within lay a handwritten missive, the characters crudely formed. "Do not provoke the Whitlock family if you wish to avoid succumbing to the same despair as your daughter. Relinquish this pursuit." My indignation surged as I perused the message. I crumpled the paper and discarded it forcefully into the waste bin, the sound shattering the prevailing quiet. That veiled menace did not instill fear, rather it galvanized my resolve. They erroneously presumed I would capitulate. They were profoundly mistaken. That very night I commenced the systematic organization of all evidence pertaining to the financial assistance I had provided Emily over the years. Bank statements, correspondence conveying my affectionate sentiments. Each item served as testament to my unwavering support. Although Ryan and his family had squandered the majority of these funds, each document held a cherished memory. I recalled instances when Emily would call, her voice quivering, expressing a desire to acquire something for the household, only for Ryan to dismiss it as unnecessary. I gripped the pen with such intensity that it nearly fractured. I had placed my trust in Ryan, believing he would provide for my daughter, but he merely viewed her as a means to an end, and once she ceased to be of utility, he discarded her without compunction. Emily awoke in the pre-dawn hours. She emerged from her chamber, her legs unsteady, and observed me at the table, engrossed in papers, my eyes weary yet filled with apprehension. "Mother," she whispered, her voice faltering, "I am afraid, I fear they may inflict harm upon you." I looked up, her crimson eyes meeting mine, and felt an oppressive squeeze around my heart. I rose, approached her, and embraced her, feeling the fragility of her frame within my arms. "You need not be afraid," I stated with conviction, though internally I was a maelstrom of nerves. "From this moment forward I shall shield you from all adversity, I promise." I guided Emily back to her room, remaining by her side until she drifted into sleep. However, slumber eluded me. I returned to the kitchen table, continuing my meticulous sorting of documents, and compiled a comprehensive list of necessary actions. I contacted an esteemed legal associate, an old acquaintance who had previously assisted me with a matter concerning the Taekwondo club. He pledged to investigate, but cautioned, The Whitlocks wield considerable sway in Boise. Miss Rose, they possess connections within the judiciary. Prepare for an arduous struggle. I nodded, though he could not perceive the gesture. I am aware, I affirmed, but I will not falter. The weeks dedicated to preparing the legal case felt like an interminable ordeal. Each night, under the subdued illumination of the lamp in my humble abode, I meticulously reviewed countless pages, re-examining every bank record, every medical report concerning Emily. These sterile figures and words served as irrefutable proof of my profound affection for my daughter, yet they also stood as poignant reminders of her endured suffering. Finally, the inaugural day of the legal proceedings arrived, and I felt as though I was stepping onto the taekwondo mat. Emily and I entered the Boise courthouse. The morning's chill permeated my substantial coat. I clasped her hand, feeling the icy frigidity of her fingers within my palm. Her eyes were reddened, marked by dark circles indicative of protracted sleepless nights. She kept her gaze lowered as if endeavouring to evade observation. I stood resolutely, striving to be her anchor, though internally I was equally unsettled. I am here, I whispered, gently squeezing her hand. She responded with a faint nod. However, her vacant gaze conveyed a spirit that had long since relinquished the struggle. The Whitlock family was already in attendance, having arrived with ample time to spare. Ryan, attired in a sharply tailored grey suit, carried himself with the self-assurance of a seasoned advocate. Prior to the proceedings, he took his seat, adjusted his necktie, and directed a contemptuous glance in our direction. Adjacent to him sat Mr. Harold, moving with deliberate slowness but possessing a gaze as sharp as a honed blade. He offered a confident smile, implying foreknowledge of the outcome. In their designated seating area, Evelyn and Abigail sat demurely, elegantly attired, occasionally exchanging whispered remarks and directing disparaging looks towards us. I sensed their palpable animosity in every gesture, but I compelled myself to maintain composure, reminding myself that this day's confrontation was not mine to wage. It belonged to Emily. Jake was also present, occupying a seat in the spectator gallery, clad in his police uniform. He offered me a subtle nod, his steady gaze a silent assurance of his unwavering support. His presence provided a sense of solidarity, as if I possessed an ally in this protracted battle. I returned his nod, silently expressing my gratitude for his unwavering presence from that harrowing Christmas Eve until this present moment. The trial commenced. My legal counsel, Mr. James, rose and meticulously presented each piece of evidence. He displayed the financial transfers I had dispatched to Emily over the years, substantiating my consistent support, despite the fact that the majority of those funds ultimately ended up in Ryan's possession. He also presented Emily's comprehensive medical documentation, including detailed annotations from her therapist regarding her psychological state. Following 4 miscarriages and the incessant disparagement from her husband's relatives, Emily had not merely suffered physical trauma. She had been emotionally devastated, stated Mr. James, his voice thick with emotion. They had treated her as an outsider within her own domicile. I observed Emily, her head bowed, her hands clasped tightly as if attempting to contain her pervasive pain. I felt an overwhelming urge to rise and embrace her, but I recognized the necessity of maintaining a stoic facade and allowing the legal representative to conduct his duties. Subsequently, the junior legal representatives for the Whitlock family stood, and I felt an encroaching sense of injustice pervading the courtroom. One of them, attired in a sleek black suit, articulated his points with a commanding cadence. Miss Emily is merely feigning illness to solicit solicitous attention. The Whitlock family has provided her with every conceivable amenity, shelter, sustenance, the fulfillment of every conceivable need. Yet she has failed to reciprocate these provisions. She has faltered as a spouse. Those declarations struck me with the force of a physical blow, feigning solicitude. My hands clenched with such vehemence that I felt my very blood begin to boil. They summoned a witness, Mrs. Martha, the Whitlocks' former domestic employee. She took the stand, her gaze darting nervously, her voice trembling. Mrs. Emily was indolent, she stated. She would sequester herself in her chamber for extended periods, neglecting her domestic responsibilities. The entirety of the household labor devolved upon me. Meal preparation, cleaning. I found her assertions utterly unbelievable. Emily, the very individual who lovingly prepared every meal, who baked homemade pies to appease the entire family, now branded as indolent. I sprang to my feet, unable to suppress my indignation. You are fabricating falsehoods. Emily was never thus inclined. The presiding judge, a middle-aged man with a stern visage, brought his gavel down sharply and stated with chilling detachment, "Silence, please. This is a judicial proceeding." I resumed my seat, my heart pounding erratically, feeling as though I could scarcely draw breath. I met Mr. Harold Whitlock's gaze. He responded with a subtle, self-satisfied inclination of his head towards the judge. An unseen connection between them sent a shiver down my spine. Something was fundamentally amiss. I sensed it with absolute certainty. They had meticulously orchestrated this entire affair, and I was merely a pawn in their intricate game of strategy. Emily remained hunched, her trembling hands gripping the edge of her chair. I observed Jake in the rear rows, his jaw set, his fists clenched, as if wrestling to restrain his own burgeoning fury. Mr. James, our legal advocate, persisted with his examination, his voice steady. "We wish to introduce pivotal evidence, an audio recording from Christmas Eve, capturing the Whitlock family's verbal assaults and psychological torment inflicted upon Emily." He initiated the playback of the recording Jake had discreetly captured. Ryan's voice resonated, cold and cruel. "She is merely fabricating depression to circumvent her obligations." Then Evelyn's, "A woman incapable of bearing children, even with adequate nutrition, is utterly useless." And Abigail's, delivered with cutting sarcasm, "She cannot even manage a successful pregnancy." The courtroom fell into a profound silence, punctuated only by faint whispers. I observed Emily, her form shrinking as if those words were once again inflicting grievous wounds. However, the Whitlocks' legal representative abruptly stood, interjecting an objection. "That recording was obtained illicitly. It was made without consent and represents a violation of privacy rights." The judge concurred, his voice devoid of inflection. "The recording is inadmissible." The ground seemed to vanish beneath me, and I clutched the chair to prevent myself from collapsing. The recording, the most unequivocal evidence of the Whitlocks' cruelty, summarily dismissed on a procedural technicality. Murmurs spread throughout the room. Some gasped in incredulity, others shook their heads in bewilderment. I glanced at Jake, his head bowed, his fists trembling on his knees. Emily concealed her face in her hands, her shoulders heaving as she stifled her tears. I felt an overwhelming urge to erupt, to storm the judge's bench and demand justice. But I understood that within that chamber, justice was not aligned with our cause. Mr. Harold sat placidly, his demeanor serene, yet imbued with an unmistakable arrogance, as if he had anticipated this very outcome. I squeezed Emily's hand, attempting to imbue her with strength, though I myself felt utterly vanquished. After a week of grueling trial days, the final verdict was rendered. I sat in the Boise courthouse, holding Emily's hand, her cold, trembling digits enclosed within mine. Throughout the week, I had strived to maintain an outward appearance of fortitude, but each night, back in my modest apartment, my heart had been racked with anguish and a pervasive sense of helplessness. Emily sat beside me, her eyes crimson from sleepless nights, her complexion pale, as if life itself had been leached from her. I gripped her hand tightly, endeavouring to impart some measure of courage, though I too was trembling. Ryan strode into the chamber, adjusting his necktie as if it were merely another ordinary day. Evelyn, his mother, smoothed her attire and sat upright, her lips adorned with a deep crimson hue, a confident smile gracing her features, suggesting foreknowledge of the outcome. Abigail, clad in a flamboyant ensemble, directed a scornful glance in our direction. Mr. Harold stood behind Ryan, an imposing figure, his gaze unyielding, serving as a stark reminder that the Whitlock family invariably maintained absolute control. Jake occupied a seat in the spectator section, still in his police uniform. His eyes conveyed a steady resolve, yet they could not entirely mask his underlying concern. He offered me a subtle nod, a silent affirmation of his unwavering allegiance. I returned a look of profound gratitude, finding solace in his presence. However, when the judge, a middle-aged man with an impassive expression, entered the chamber, a chilling sensation coursed through me. The atmosphere grew heavy, as if every occupant was bracing for an unavoidable pronouncement. The judge began to speak, his voice dry and firm. The court hereby grants the divorce petition filed by the plaintiff, Emily Harper Larson, and the defendant, Ryan Whitlock. Those words ignited a flicker of hope within me. Emily began to weep silently, tears streaming down her cheeks. I squeezed her hand, urging her to remain composed and attentive. The divorce was precisely what I desired for Emily, an opportunity to escape the Whitlocks' oppressive dominion. Yet I understood that this ruling was merely a prelude. The judge continued, his voice monotonous, akin to the recitation of a report. However, the court does not acknowledge the allegations of domestic maltreatment due to insufficient legal substantiation. Regarding the division of assets, given that Ryan Whitlock made greater contributions to the maintenance of the marital union, the court awards him the preponderance of the jointly acquired property. Those pronouncements struck me with the impact of a crushing blow. I froze, my breath arrested in my throat. No acknowledgement of domestic abuse, insufficient corroborating evidence. I recalled the Christmas Eve recording, the cruel pronouncements of Ryan, Evelyn, and Abigail, summarily dismissed due to a procedural technicality. I thought of Emily's medical records, the bank statements, all distorted and manipulated by the Whitlocks' legal team into evidence against us. It then dawned on me. Mr. Harold, with his prior tenure as a judge and his extensive connections within the judicial system, had orchestrated this outcome. I met his gaze, observing him tilt his head slightly, that smug smile still lingering on his lips. The entire proceeding had been predetermined. They had manipulated the ruling, and Emily and I were merely pawns in their carefully constructed game. I could no longer contain my emotions. I sprang to my feet, my voice fractured by a potent admixture of rage and sorrow. This is profoundly unjust. This is not justice. My outburst reverberated, silencing the entire chamber. Emily grasped my hand, her eyes wide with alarm, but I pressed on. You witnessed the manner in which they treated my daughter. You heard the ordeals she endured, and you still presume to assert that no abuse occurred? You presume to strip her of everything? A bailiff approached, his voice firm. Mum, kindly resume your seat, or I shall be compelled to escort you from the premises. I glared at him, then at the judge, who remained impassive, his countenance blank, as if my impassioned words held no significance. I sat down, my hands trembling uncontrollably, feeling the very fabric of my world disintegrating around me. Ryan turned, met my gaze, and offered a mocking smile, adjusting his tie as if he had just achieved a monumental victory. Evelyn and Abigail nudged each other, stifling giggles, ensuring I was aware of their amusement. That laughter felt like a dagger plunging deeply into my heart. Mr. Harold offered a slow, deliberate nod, his gaze serene as if this were merely another instance where he had subtly manipulated the proceedings. I observed them all, one by one, my blood boiling with indignation. They had not only denied Emily justice, they had also irrevocably shattered my faith in a system I had once believed to be equitable. Emily covered her face with her hands, her body racked with tremors, her muffled sobs tearing at my very soul. I yearned to embrace her, to assure her that everything would eventually be all right, but no words could escape my constricted throat. The judge's pronouncements echoed in my mind like a final sentence, not only for Emily but for me as well. Jake, from his position in the back, abruptly stood, his eyes fixed with an intense glare upon the Whitlocks. I observed the veins bulging in his arms, his fists clenched as if he were struggling to contain a tempest of righteous fury. I signaled him to maintain his composure, though my own impulse was to scream and wreak havoc within that room. The judge brought his gavel down, his voice sharp. "Order. The session is concluded. All parties may now depart." The resonant sound of the gavel marked a definitive end, but for me it signaled the commencement of a fresh wave of suffering. Individuals began to rise, their voices murmuring, papers rustling, but I remained seated, holding Emily tightly, her trembling shoulders and anguished sobs fracturing me from within. I desperately wanted to offer her comfort, but my throat constricted, rendering words utterly inadequate against this profound sorrow. The unjust ruling had not merely deprived Emily of material possessions, it had irrevocably eroded my belief that the legal system would ultimately provide her with protection. Ryan sauntered over, his posture imbued with an arrogant triumph, as if he had secured a significant victory. He leaned close to my ear, whispering mockingly, "You see, Rose, I cautioned you against confronting me. You are merely a spent force, an irrelevant old woman." A sardonic grin stretched across his face, his gaze alight with victory, before he turned to depart, as if Emily and I held no significance whatsoever. His words were like accelerant to the flames of my indignation. My circulation throbbed, my veins visibly pulsing. I clenched my fists with such intensity that pain radiated through me, my frame taut as a drawn bow poised to shatter. I harbored a visceral urge to surge forward and deliver a blow to that conceited visage, to exact retribution for all that he had inflicted upon my child. After years immersed in the discipline of Taekwondo coaching, I had cultivated self-control, yet in that precise instant, every defensive barrier I possessed dissolved. I took a single step, my heart hammering against my ribs, poised to commit an act I would undoubtedly lament. But Jake, with eyes ablaze and lips compressed into a grim line, his fist clenched as if preparing to strike Ryan, darted in front of me. I recognized my own fury mirrored in his expression, an unyielding indignation at the gross injustice. The courtroom was a cacophony of rising voices. Would they resort to fisticuffs? A law enforcement officer engaging in violence within the hallowed halls of justice. Some fumbled for their mobile devices, the flashes of cameras illuminating the palpable tension. In a corner, a journalist raised his equipment, his eyes glinting with an insatiable hunger for scandal. Ryan pivoted, momentarily taken aback, but swiftly reasserted his defiance. A glacial smirk touched his lips. "Proceed, strike me. I shall ensure your utter ruin. Who do you presume to be? Just some low-rent constable?" He advanced provocatively, utterly convinced that Jake would never dare lay a hand on him. Jake's knuckles quivered, his respiration laboured, his eyes suffused with a crimson hue. I understood he was perilously close to an irreversible action. Suddenly, Emily wrenched herself free from my grasp, raced towards Jake and clung to his arm, her voice fractured by sobs. "No, please, do not do this. I do not want you or Mother to descend into violence as he has. My sole desire is for tranquility. I simply wish to continue living." Her anguished cry pierced the air, plunging the room into an abrupt silence. I witnessed tears streaming down Emily's face, her slender hands gripping Jake as if he were her final bulwark. Jake faltered, his breathing ragged, his fiery gaze gradually subsiding. His fist, rigid for a fleeting moment, trembled, then slowly relaxed, dropping to his side. He lowered his head, his lips a taut line, wrestling to contain the consuming rage within him. The staccato of camera shutters echoed, flashes illuminating Emily entwined with Jake, Ryan standing regally before them. Some individuals in the assembly, perhaps oblivious to the gravity of the case, began to weep. A soft wave of lamentation washed over the room, as if Emily's sorrow had permeated their very beings. I surveyed the scene, a woman dabbing her eyes, a man shaking his head in profound sadness. But the Whitlocks remained impassive. Evelyn and Abigail exchanged furtive whispers, their smiles chilling. "Mister." Harold offered a subtle nod, his authoritative demeanour unruffled, projecting an air of complete command. The judge's gavel struck the desk with an authoritative thud, his voice steely. "Order. Should this disturbance persist, I shall direct the bailiffs to clear the chamber." The sharp report of the gavel served as a stark admonition, jarring everyone back to the stark reality of their surroundings. I stepped forward, gently took Emily into my arms and embraced her tightly. She continued to sob, her small body trembling against me like a lost child. Jake stood by our side, head bowed, his jaw set, as if he blamed himself for not intervening more forcefully. I placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, offering a gentle nod, conveying my understanding and my gratitude for his presence. Ryan straightened his tie, turned and departed, his stride imbued with the weight of his perceived victory. Evelyn and Abigail followed, their disembodied laughter akin to another dagger twisting in my heart. The room gradually emptied, leaving only Emily, Jake, and myself. 3 souls bound by the same knot of bitterness in our throats. I held Emily closer, feeling the fragile cadence of her breath against my shoulder. "Mum," she whispered, her voice cracking, "I no longer wish to contest this. I am exhausted. May we simply return home?" Those words were a physical blow, shattering my resolve. I longed to assure her that everything would be all right, that I would persevere in our struggle, but my throat constricted, rendering me speechless. I guided Emily from the courtroom, Jake walking in dignified silence beside us, his gaze resolute. The subdued sunlight of Boise filtered through the windows, yet it offered no warmth to my spirit. I knew that today's verdict transcended a mere legal defeat. It was a formal declaration of hostilities. The Whitlocks might have triumphed in the courtroom, but I was determined they would not prevail in Emily's life. I looked at her, her eyes still red-rimmed, yet harbouring a nascent flicker, a fragile ember of hope. However diminished, for that spark I vowed not to yield. In the ensuing days after the trial, a palpable undercurrent seemed to ripple through Boise. Local media outlets began to report on the proceedings. Stark headlines graced the front pages. "Whitlock trial, justice for sale." Reading those words, my heart pounded in unison with the unspoken pain they articulated, Emily's and mine. On social media platforms, the footage of Emily clinging to Jake in the courtroom circulated with astonishing speed. The image of my daughter, her eyes swollen, her voice choked with emotion, imploring Jake to shun violence, resonated deeply with countless individuals. The comment sections overflowed with expressions of outrage. The Whitlocks believe they can orchestrate every outcome. Emily deserves far better than this. Seated in our modest apartment, perusing these sentiments, I found a measure of solace, despite the court's blatant disregard for our plight. The collective voice of the community was beginning to rally behind Emily. The Whitlocks, notwithstanding their legal triumph, started to feel the repercussions. I overheard Mr. Harold's former associates engaging in hushed whispers, circulating rumors of his alleged manipulation of the legal system. Ryan, now infamously branded the lawyer of injustice, became the target of widespread online condemnation. The veneer of prestige the family so ostentatiously displayed began to crumble, much like a sandcastle succumbing to the relentless tide. While I found no pleasure in their downfall, I experienced a faint sense of vindication, not from the judicial system, but from the power of public opinion. I brought Emily to reside with me in my small dwelling, illuminated by the soft amber glow of lamps, the walls adorned with cherished family photographs. Each morning, I would rise early to prepare her breakfast. Occasionally, fluffy pancakes drizzled with maple syrup. At other times, simple scrambled eggs accompanied by toast. Emily would sit languidly at the table, cradling a steaming mug of tea, her gaze fixed on the window, where the tentative rays of sunlight slipped between the rooftops of Boise. On certain days, I would observe silent tears, tracing paths down her cheeks like gentle raindrops. Yet I sensed Emily was slowly, tentatively beginning to heal. With each passing day, her utterances grew more frequent, her eyes reflecting a diminishing emptiness. I refrained from pressuring her, choosing instead to remain a steadfast presence by her side, a mother prepared to shield her daughter from any impending tempest. Jake seamlessly integrated into the fabric of our lives. He would visit, sometimes bearing a small posy of poinsettias, other times bringing delectable donuts from the neighborhood bakery. Each visit brought a subtle radiance to Emily, as if his presence were a balm for her soul. One afternoon, Jake, betraying a hint of apprehension, presented Emily with a small box. Nestled within was a keychain meticulously crafted in the likeness of a taekwondo uniform, bearing the very emblem I had imparted to him and my other pupils. "You are not obliged to muster your full strength immediately," he conveyed, his voice soft yet imbued with conviction, "but you can commence anew incrementally, much like Ms. Rose demonstrated." Emily accepted the keychain, her movements momentarily suspended, her eyes shining with a profound emotional response. She pressed her lips together, restraining a surge of tears, then offered a slow, deliberate nod. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice delicate but brimming with heartfelt sincerity. I observed from a distance, remaining silent, feeling an immense burden lift from my chest. For years, Emily had been subjected to disparagement, labeled as inadequate. Now, someone perceived her intrinsic value, cherishing her not for her accomplishments, but for the essence of her being. I turned away, discreetly wiping a tear from my cheek, unwilling to expose my vulnerability to Emily. One evening, as the sunset bathed the apartment in a golden luminescence, Emily sat opposite Jake on the sofa. Her head was bowed, her hands nervously twisting the hem of her sweater, her voice quivering. "Jake," she began, "it is possible I may never be able to conceive children. Should that cause you disappointment?" She paused, seemingly apprehensive that these words might unravel their burgeoning connection. I feigned busyness in the kitchen, ostensibly washing dishes, yet my heart seized, awaiting Jake's response. He offered a warm, steady smile, took her hands in his and met her gaze directly. I require nothing more than what you already are, Emily. You are and always will be my family. Those pronouncements were like a warm breeze, dispelling the lingering chill within my chest. I absorbed them, a lump forming in my throat, my vision blurring. For an extended period, Emily had endured humiliation, ostracized for her perceived failure as a wife due to her inability to bear children. Now, someone affirmed her inherent worth, assuring her that she was complete, deserving of love simply for existing. I turned my face away, allowing tears to flow unobserved, my heart overflowing with a gratitude too profound for utterance. Easter arrived, and I took Emily's hand, leading her through Boise's Central Plaza, evoking cherished memories of her childhood, skipping joyfully along illuminated avenues. The plaza teemed with the effervescent laughter of children and the comforting aroma of freshly baked pies emanating from the food stalls. Emily wore a light-hued sweater, her hair neatly tied back, and for the first time in many months, a genuine smile graced her lips, a radiant smile reminiscent of the vernal sun. "Mother," she said softly, "I yearn for those days. I miss when you would instruct me in the art of apple pie preparation, when you recounted your taekwondo competitions." I smiled, gently squeezing her hand. "I miss them as well, my dearest, and I shall forever remain by your side, creating further cherished memories with you." As we settled onto a wooden bench, observing the children at play near the fountain, a simple yet profound truth illuminated my understanding. Justice, within the confines of legal institutions, could be corrupted, bought by the influence of power and wealth. However, the justice of the heart, love, respect, and unwavering resilience was an intangible force, impervious to external forces. Emily, despite her profound losses, was gradually rediscovering herself, each step a testament to her burgeoning strength. And I, a mother who had once felt utterly disempowered, now recognized that my most formidable asset lay not in the powerful blows I could deliver in the training ring, but in the boundless depths of my love for my daughter. Jake appeared bearing a bag of warm churros and presented one to Emily, after which they engaged in animated conversation, their laughter flowing easily as if they were old confidants. I observed them, my heart swelling with an abundance of hope. Emily might carry the indelible scars inflicted by the Whitlocks, but she was progressively learning to navigate forward, to embrace self-acceptance, and to open her heart to those who genuinely valued her. And I, at 65 years of age, having weathered countless adversities, understood that the enduring quest for Emily's happiness was the most profoundly significant endeavor of all. This narrative is a work of fiction, yet it draws inspiration from authentic life experiences. The names and locations have been altered to safeguard the identities of those involved. Our intention in sharing this story is not to pass judgment, but rather to encourage contemplation, hoping that it might prompt individuals to consider the silent struggles endured by countless mothers within the confines of their own homes. I am genuinely curious. Were you to find yourself in my predicament, what course of action would you pursue? Would you elect to remain silent in the pursuit of peace, or would you summon the courage to confront the totality of the situation in order to reclaim your voice? Your perspectives are invaluable to me, for every narrative serves as a beacon, capable of illuminating the path for another. May divine blessings always be bestowed. I hold an unwavering conviction that courage invariably leads to brighter horizons. In the interim, at the conclusion of this video, I have provided links to 2 of the channel's most beloved stories. I assure you they will undoubtedly captivate your interest. Thank you for accompanying me to this juncture.